Good night, Tales.
The cold ones beneath. Dr. Lena Mara pressed her gloved fingers against the frost-laced window of the helicopter, watching as the world below transformed from pale tundra to a glittering sea of white. Ice stretched for miles, cold, ancient, and unforgiving. Somewhere beneath that crust lay secrets untouched by sunlight for thousands of years. "See that ridge?" shouted Elias Tack, their local guide, over the din of the rotors. He pointed to a line of jagged blue peaks rising like broken glass from the glacier. "That's where we set camp. You'll want to keep your eyes open after nightfall. Some things move that shouldn't." Lena gave a half-smile, unsure whether he was joking. After 3 months of coordination, budget fights, and NSF grant deadlines, she wasn't in the mood for ghost stories. Still, the unease in his voice wasn't staged. As the chopper descended, the 6-person research team inside grew quiet. Each wore bulky thermal suits, heads bowed over equipment or staring into the white void outside. Lena knew all their names, but barely their voices. They were scientists, used to solitude, analysis, and long winters and longer silences. There was Dr. Ravi Singh, a geologist who had once survived a landslide in Nepal. There was Sarah Kwan, the youngest member and a brilliant structural engineer. Anders Halverson, the Finnish glaciologist whose stare could melt snow. Ironically, Jenny Sue, microbiologist and hypothermia risk by body mass. And finally, Scott Mercer, expedition leader and logistics man, former Air Force, all bark, mostly muscle. The chopper touched down with a thud, kicking up snow in all directions. Lena grabbed her pack and stepped onto the ice. Cold immediately punched through the soles of her boots, and the wind was sharp, howling. The sky above was a pale indigo, with ribbons of aurora already twisting faintly above the horizon. Early for the season. "Welcome to Site Boreas 7, Scott announced. "Population 6, soon to be 5 if one of you idiots forgets to zip your suit." The team unpacked their gear while Eli paced a slow, wide circle around the landing zone. He whispered as he walked, words not meant for anyone else. "What's he doing?" Sarah asked, nudging Lena. "Probably blessing the ground," Lena replied. "Why, something buried under it?" Lena shrugged. "Isn't there always?" By nightfall, the temperature had plunged to -40. Even with generators humming and tents insulated, the cold felt sentient. Lena huddled in her sleeping bag, typing notes on a thermal tablet. Wind pressed against the tent fabric like fingers. At times, it seemed to stop entirely. No gust, no sound, no movement. Those moments were worse than the howling. The silence felt watched. Over the next 2 days, the team settled into a routine. They drilled test scores into the glacier, recording samples and noting seismic irregularities. Something was off. The readings from Lena's sensors showed residual warmth deep below the ice, too warm for a region untouched by climate variance, almost like something below was breathing. "Could be geothermal," Ravi muttered, "but it's too local. It doesn't spread out." "Maybe a lava tube," Sarah offered. "Not in this region," Anderson cut in. "This is a solid shelf, no activity for centuries." Eli said nothing, but he watched the ice like it might blink. On the 4th morning, Sarah discovered the tunnel. She had wandered farther than usual during a measurement scan, and her voice came sharply through the comms. "Guys, I think you'll want to see this." They followed her coordinates, trudging across hard-packed ice for nearly half an hour. There, beneath a wind-carved overhang, was a hole, perfectly circular, roughly 2 meters wide, not drilled, not natural. "The walls," Sarah whispered, aiming a light into the shaft. "They're smooth, like glass. And there are marks, symbols." Lena leaned in, heart pounding. The symbols looked like runes, but not Nordic, not anything she'd seen, and they pulsed faintly under the light. Part 2, First Signs. They set up a secondary tent beside the tunnel, careful not to disturb the opening. Scott, with military efficiency, posted a rotating watch. Eli refused to go near the tunnel at all. "I've seen these before," he said in a low voice. "Once, long ago, with my grandfather. The elders called it a seal, a boundary, not an entrance." Scott scoffed. "It's a damn hole in the ground." "No," Eli replied, staring at the tunnel as though it might grow teeth. "It's a warning." Despite Eli's unease, the scientific urge was too strong. Sarah lowered a thermal drone into the shaft. The feed flickered but stayed steady as it descended. 50 meters down, the tunnel curved sharply. The drone's floodlight revealed black ice, so smooth it looked like obsidian. Symbols etched along the walls twisted subtly, almost like they were rearranging when the light moved. Lena blinked twice, unsure if it was a trick of her eyes. "There's a chamber," Sarah said, excitement rising. "It levels off." "Whoa, there's a door. An actual door." The feed cut to static. That night, Anders didn't come back from his watch. They found his rifle in the snow, frozen and untouched. No blood, no signs of struggle, only his footprints walking steadily toward the tunnel, and nothing else. Scott swore under his breath. Lena felt something seize in her gut. Anders was methodical, rational, not someone prone to panic or sleepwalking. Eli looked grim. He was called. "By who?" Ravi snapped. "There's no one out here." Eli just pointed to the tunnel. They searched for hours, no trace. Eventually they called it off. That night the wind stopped. Not a single gust passed over their tents. And then Lena heard her brother's voice. Her brother had died in a car crash 8 years ago. She knew that, remembered the phone call, the funeral, the coldness of the casket. But the voice that whispered her name outside her tent flap was unmistakably his. "Lena, open up!" She sat frozen in her sleeping bag, heart pounding. The voice was wrong, not just too soft, but too distant, like it came from behind a wall of ice. She didn't open the flap. Instead, she sat still, clutching her flashlight, and waited. By morning, frost had crept across the inside walls of her tent. Not normal frost. Patterns, swirls, eyes. The team grew increasingly paranoid. They argued, slept little, temperatures dropped lower than forecasted, unnaturally low. Equipment froze solid, even inside the tents. Scott decided they needed to break into the chamber. "We came here for answers. If that tunnel leads to a sealed structure, it's a discovery worth millions." "You mean worth killing us?" Lena snapped. "We've already lost Anders. No body," Scott growled. "No proof he's dead." "I heard something last night," Ravi said. "It sounded like my daughter. She's in Seattle." Eli grabbed his shoulder. That's how they feed. On what you miss, what you love. But Scott had already begun rigging ropes and climbing gear. The next morning, they descended. Part 3, The Cold Ones Awaken. The descent into the tunnel was a ritual of silence. Even Scott, who had barked orders and scoffed at warnings, spoke little as they clipped into the line and lowered themselves down. Lena was third. The cold deepened unnaturally with every meter, sinking into her bones like knives. She kept her eyes locked on the walls, smooth black ice, etched with pale grooves. The symbols seemed to ripple at the edge of her vision. When they reached the chamber, time seemed to slow. The room was vast, larger than any cave they'd ever charted, yet geometrically perfect. Hexagonal panels lined the ceiling like a honeycomb of frozen starlight. In the center stood the door, a wall of translucent ice shaped like a monolith. Something darker moved just beneath its surface. "No hinges," Sarah whispered. "No seals. It's pressure-locked." Scott stepped forward with a thermal cutter. "We open it, we document it, we get the hell out." "No," Eli said. He had followed them after all, against his instincts. "If you open it, you don't get out." Scott hesitated, looked back at the others, then triggered the cutter. The ice hissed, steamed, and cracked. The door began to shift on its own. Inside the chamber were figures, rows of them, frozen in the ice like flies in amber. Human or once human, they stood in silent vigil, eyes closed. Their clothing spanned centuries. A fur-cloaked Viking, a 19th century explorer, a woman in a lab coat identical to Lena's. The temperature plummeted. The lights flickered. "That's not possible," Jenny whispered, approaching one of the bodies. "The preservation. There's no decomposition. Nothing." The closest figure opened its eyes. Jenny screamed. Robbie yanked her back just as the body's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, but it watched. All the others began to twitch. Back at the surface, Jenny refused to sleep. She kept muttering about her mother, about songs she heard when she closed her eyes. Sarah began to hum lullabies she didn't remember knowing. Lena caught herself speaking out loud to someone she thought was long dead. Then Eli collapsed. He had traced the runes onto a scrap of canvas, trying to translate them. Lena found him shaking in the snow, blood running from his nose. He gripped her wrist with inhuman strength. "They're not dead," he croaked. "Just waiting, waiting to be remembered. That's how they move." "What do you mean?" "Their memory. They live in what we forgot, what we bury." Scott wanted to call for evac. The radio was dead. No power, no warmth, no direction. They tried to reseal the tunnel, but the ice refused to hold. It cracked and pulsed from beneath, like something enormous was shifting below the glacier. "We opened a vein," Lena said. "Now it's bleeding." That night, they heard Anderson's voice. He walked into camp, his body stiff, pale, his eyes full of frost. "Why'd you leave me?" he asked. "It's warmer down there. Come see." Eli lit the fuel stores. A wall of fire burst across the snow, engulfing the tunnel entrance. Anders didn't scream. He just stood in the flames, smiling as the fire devoured him. Part 4, Escape and Aftermath. The fire held the cold ones back for a night. But ice remembers, and memory is relentless. By dawn, the tunnel was gone. buried under tons of blackened snow. Yet the temperature kept falling. The auroras above twisted into unnatural shapes, eyes, circles, glyphs too ancient for language. Jenny was the next to go. She wandered into the storm barefoot, humming the same melody Lena had heard in her tent. They found her boots at the edge of the ridge, still warm. No footsteps, no body. Sarah snapped next. She smashed the sample containers, screamed about voices in the ice, telling her the truth, that they were already dead, that this was all memory collapsing in on itself. Scott sedated her. The next morning, she was gone too. Only her suit remained, empty, turned inside out, and dusted with frost. Lena and Ravi begged Eli to help them reseal whatever lay below. Eli nodded. There's one way left, but it's not science. It's remembering the forgetting. He packed his grandfather's journal, stepped back into the ruins of the tunnel, and began chanting. Not words Lena understood, but vibrations that made the snow stand still. The sky pulsed violet, the wind stopped, and then came a sound like a glacier sighing, a deep, hollow exhale. The ice surged forward, collapsing the tunnel completely. Lena screamed his name as the entrance sealed over. She never saw him again. Scott and Ravi died in the storm 2 days later, buried while trying to reinforce the antenna tower. Lena survived by burrowing into the supply tent and burning every document, every journal, every photo. She stayed awake. She did not dream. She did not speak. When the rescue team finally arrived, she could not feel her hands, could barely form words, but she was alive. Weeks passed. Lena recovered in a hospital outside Anchorage. Officials debriefed her, took statements, examined what few samples remained. No one believed her. Satellite records of the expedition were inconclusive. Drone footage had vanished. The NSF pulled the grant. The incident was written off as weather-related loss of personnel. No one mentioned the cold ones. No one remembered Eli. No one but Lena. Epilogue. Late one night, Lena sat alone in her hospital room. Snow fell beyond the window, quiet and slow. She stood to wash her face. As she looked into the mirror, her breath caught. Frost was creeping along the edges of the glass. From the inside, behind her reflection, a second face smiled back. Not hers, not human, but it remembered her.